Yo. I never know how to start this.
No, I know.
All right. We're going to talk about motivation today because
we don't know what it
is. What the hell is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of just something that's been on my mind for the last couple of weeks. If you're talking to Kayla, she'd probably tell you she's real sick of hearing me talk about this all the time. Because I don't know. I just get fixated on things that I don't understand. And then people tell me, well, no, this is what it is. So I was like, but I'm not really entirely sure if that's what it means.
Hard to let those things go.
It is. You get hung on to it a little bit.
On here.
Yeah, so it's nice to have a little outlet that once I get off my chest here, I feel like I want to talk about it anymore. And Kayla won't have to hear about it every single day.
Do you feel like you remember certain concepts, mechanisms, tools, whatever in your coaching if you talked about it on here? Like you remember those better? Sorry. Does that make sense?
No. What do you mean?
So, for instance, I'm trying to think of a good example. I don't know, like an episode where I think we've done this recently where let's use the one where both you and I finally kind of talked about our businesses a wee bit more. You would have went over like a few of the assessment tools that you used. Do you find that, so maybe if you've been programming for a client recently, especially like starting a new one or whatever, do you find that those like assessment tools or kind of like the steps you go through to start someone fresh, making decisions on like kind of which path might be best for them, do you find that that's like kind of a bit more snappy or fresh in your mind after talking about it on here, or most of those things just already habitual?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's definitely a lot more snappy after talking about it, because I think a lot of the stuff that comes out when we're having conversations like this is things that's in there, but something I haven't thought about in a while.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like tucked back in a corner somewhere.
And it's different trying to explain that to people versus just thinking through it in your head at your computer.
Right. Yeah, because to be able to explain it to somebody else, you have to understand it on a different level.
That's definitely something I've noticed.
Yeah.
100%. Been trying to use that to my advantage. I don't know if I've really successfully done that yet. Just in terms of, if we talk about something on here and I think, oh, that'd be useful for other people. So while it's fresh on my mind and I could write it out or recite it in 30 seconds fresh, why don't I do that now on, whatever, like social media or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, totally. It does.
It's been good for that.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. So the motivation thing.
Yeah, sorry, I derailed you there.
No, that's good. That's a good one. It's good because I didn't even think about what you just said to the point where I didn't even understand what you were saying. And then now that's taking up my space in my brain. That's one thing. I was like, yeah, I do that all the time now, actually. Yeah. I don't know. I think I got to finish the thought on that then, I guess, since I'm still on it.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm still talking about it. I think like having this podcast done every single week, that kind of keeps me more on a straightened arrow through the week to make sure I'm learning more and like taking in more information, because if I don't, then I'm going to run out of shit to talk about.
That's a damn good point. Yeah.
And then this whole thing that we've been doing, what is this, 33? We're in our 30s for sure.
Something like that.
So like, damn. Yeah, I mean, when we started, we didn't know what we were talking about, and we still don't know what we're talking about. And, it's going to just keep going from there. Yeah. And I mean, like, we don't really know what's going to come out. We don't really take notes. Like, there's coffee on the table, and that's it. Like, it's not like we go off of the template of things. We come up with a concept, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, people ask that, eh?
Yeah.
I've heard that question a few times.
Yeah, it's like.
There's been a couple, but it's pretty rare.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know the podcast we had with Lindsay, I had a few, because there was some points that I wanted to ask her about that I didn't want to forget.
Yeah, and that was just more to make sure we got the information out of her that we wanted everyone to hear, because she has so much knowledge. Like, I mean, we can only get so much out of her in an hour conversation, but we wanted to hit some major
and
points.
It's easy to, especially if she gets onto a point, she obviously goes into so much detail, it's easy to get off on another track, and then ultimately you would totally forget about the questions that you wanted to ask in the first place. So there's a couple like that, but otherwise it's just two potatoes sitting here.
Yeah.
We'll start recording for you soon so you can see what's really going on.
Yeah, we're going through a whole brand. Well, not rebranding because we never really had one to begin with, but going through. This is like, I feel like, I don't know. This is just how I never really plan anything out. I just go for it and see what happens. And I think that's what we did with this. It was like, hey, let's do this. And then it's like, 2 days later, we're recording our first episode. And it's like, you're throwing together some clip art thing for our photo for.
We should get that printed once we get a new logo, I think.
Just like side by side.
It's like when people print or get framed an old newspaper article.
Yeah, the OG.
Post it on their wall.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. We've just been winging it every single week. And now we're like, oh, we should probably, now that we're doing this thing and some people are actually listening to what we have to say,
that's right,
then we should probably do it a little bit better for them.
Just going to benefit you, the listener.
Yeah. You'd be able to look at our stupid mugs while we talk. See how much fidgeting and standing and walking around and drinking of coffee goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, we should make our own coffee.
Oh, dude, that's a segue. Okay, we're trying to find a segue to talk about this. Motivation. Okay, stakes are high. Motivation is higher when the stakes are highest, I think. So,
indeed.
For the motivation for this podcast, so for me to learn new things, comes from the motivation that if I don't have something new to say the next week, then this whole thing crumbles. So the pressure of having that, it's not a huge pressure for me because I really enjoy doing this. Like, this is a really fun part of the week for me. And I always learn something from you or from our guests or from my own research trying to prep for it. But I think without having this podcast being recorded every Wednesday, it'd be easy to be like, I'm good. Right? Like, just subconsciously not really pushing to learn something new or listen to other podcasts. Because we learn a lot just from listening to other podcasts and seeing how they do it.
Yeah.
Because for us, like, we're far enough into this now where we want to make it worth our time from like a financial standpoint too. So that involves like a whole other level of doing this. It's turning it into more of a professional setting than just a fun thing. So yeah, that's what I feel. And so the motivation thing, like being motivated to do something to me is a really abstract idea. I don't really understand it at all, but to the best of my knowledge, it's just like an overwhelming feeling of like anxiety that like pushes you to be better.
Good point, actually.
You know, like motivated. When I'm most motivated, I feel like I'm a complete gong show.
Yeah.
Like I can't think about anything else. I can't talk about anything else. I space out all the time. I'm terrible at holding conversation with people about anything other than the thing that I need to do. Right, like small talk's non-existent. Like somebody's like, "How's the weather?" My response is like, bleh. Right? Like I don't even have time for that. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong, actually. But I feel like that's when I'm the most motivated to do something. So like having the stakes being higher related to health. How can I do this? So like, let me try to explain my jumbled up, marbled brain thinking here. So. On a day-to-day basis, there isn't a whole lot of motivation for somebody to be healthy. And the reason why I say that is because, I mean, you see it all the time. My dad's a pretty good example of this. He's got diabetes, so he could change his lifestyle. He could change his nutrition. He could change his exercise. He could change his addictions. Well, not addictions. That's not something that you can change, but something to work on, like habits, habitual things that he does. In order to be healthier, or he could just take his insulin, right? So it's like there's no real consequence for him. If he decides that he's going to drink a 12-pack of beer on a Thursday night watching Wheel of Fortune, then he'll just take a little bit more insulin and the next day he'll be fine, right? It's not like he's going to die or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, and that's, I mean, an extreme example. But even just going to the gym, right? Today's a nicer day. You get home. It's like, well, I'm just going to barbecue. Just kind of chill with the dogs, whatever. I'm not really going to get up too much. Don't really feel like going to the gym. Nothing happens. Like in the grand scheme of things, your life doesn't change at all. So you have to like create some sort of deadline, I think, in order to be motivated, like some sort of, I don't know, competition or thing like that. Yeah. But I don't know. It's so hard to do.
It's very hard to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
It's like, yeah, I mean, it's really visualizing something that doesn't even exist, technically, right?
Yeah.
I remember this was probably elementary school, I want to say. They used to have they'd have speakers come in the odd time. I mean, I'm sure they still do it. I can't even really name you a good example because it was so long ago. But anyways, for whatever reason, I remember a line that one of them said, and it was something along the lines of like, motivation is really only a temporary thing. And I mean, you already hit on a lot of this right now, just now, but that's spot on. Like, people always talk about, you got to be motivated for this, motivated for that. But like you said, like, it's not as easy as one might think. Like, it's a short-term thing. Like I just said, like, even if if you hear, I mean, you can go on YouTube and type in, any number of motivational speeches, something will pop up. You could literally watch those things all day long on repeat over and over and over again. Motivational speaker. You might finish that clip and just be jacked up through the roof. Like, my God, here we go. This is going to be incredible. Like, I'm going to change my life around.
That's right. Yeah.
You maybe stick to it for 3, 4, 5 days. And then, that motivation from watching that video is gone. So then you have to recreate it again.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if people realize that the motivation should go away. Like, I think maybe people often beat themselves up. Well, they certainly do beat themselves up for not feeling motivated.
Yeah,
that's
huge.
normal.
Yeah.
That's supposed to happen. That happens to everyone. So I think maybe it's definitely something that took me a long time to realize, because I was the same way. Like, I would beat myself up for not feeling motivated about whatever. It could be anything. It could be starting my own business and then thinking like something's wrong with me. I got to fix that, and on and on and on. And I don't know, I guess somewhere along the lines, I realized what you're saying right now is like, that's normal. You just kind of have to recreate motivation yourself as you go along.
Yeah. Cause it's an emotion, I guess. The more we talk about it, it's like, it's not a state of being. It's just like an emotion that you feel. Just like through the day, you can go through fluctuation of feeling tired or happy or sad or motivated or defeated or depressed or anxious or whatever, as a feeling, not as a disease. Of course, I would always make sure that I'm separating those things, but like just as a feeling. So in order to constantly chase a feeling of motivation, it's like, I don't think that's good. And I think that, like Gary Vee, all those things, that's kind of a good example of, like, you watch a Gary Vee video on Instagram, you're pretty pumped up for about 30 seconds. And then if you scroll far enough, you're going to see something that just takes it away. You'll see like a cute puppy or something like that. And then the feeling goes away. You're like, oh, that's a cute puppy. And now I'm comfy and I'm sitting on my couch. I'm going to stay here. I don't think anyone has to be motivated. I don't really think so. I think a lot of it is like just having some sort of like discipline around things is what gives you the freedom to feel however you want to feel. Like, when you know you're going to get certain things done, it doesn't really matter how you feel when you're going through them. You just do it. You don't really have to be motivated if you hold yourself to that standard. But again, I think you have to make the stakes high enough that you do it, right? Like, for example, what you've done with your business and what I've watched you do over the last 3 months.
Well, whenever we started this.
Yeah. But it's been a big change. And I think what it comes down to is the stakes were high for you, right? Like, you didn't take on any. You didn't take on a full-time job to fall back on. And I think that's what a lot of people make a mistake of, is they're like, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, but I'm still going to work my job. It's like, nah, you're not going to do it. You don't have to. And you're not going to, the sole reason why you're not going to do it is because you don't have to do it. Because your well-being and like your quality of life isn't on the line. Like, if you shit the bed with your business and didn't do anything, Keelan's going to be pissed at you.
Oh yeah. Right? So that's a motivator.
So your life at home gets stressful because you're not pulling your weight. I'm using hand quotations in the relationship. And it doesn't even have to be financial weight. It just has to be like, nobody wants to be with somebody who doesn't do shit.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you're just a slob and you don't do anything, nobody wants to be around you. You're just not a fun person because you get stuck in a sequence of anxiety and depression and like feeling those ways. Again, not the disease, but as like a feeling. And then when you're constantly stuck in that weird space, you're just not fun to be around. So then your significant other doesn't want anything to do with you.
Yeah.
And then from a financial standpoint too, like you want to have freedom to do what you want to do when you want to do it. So you have to make money in order to do that, because that's how the world works. You can't, like, this isn't some hippie idea where it's like, oh, just do whatever you want, it'll all work out. Like, no, bitch, you actually have to make money too, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to do stuff. You can't just be like frolicking around like a goof, pretending everything's going to be okay. Like you actually have to make stuff work too.
Yeah.
The best is trying to explain to my grandparents what I do still. Do you have to do that ever?
Oh, it's impossible.
Oh my God. So funny. Oh yeah, it's good stuff. Because that's just a different time. And if you've been an employee your whole life, you just don't understand. It's hard to explain to somebody where it's like,
yeah, even my parents, it can be a challenge.
Yeah, sometimes like, oh, you're off today? No.
Yeah.
No. Oh well, you're here. It's like, yeah. But guess what I did before I came here, and guess what I'm going to do when I get home. Yeah. It's not because I have to. It's I want to do that. Like it's something that you enjoy doing. It's not a burden. I'd rather work 7 days a week for what I'm doing than work 5 days a week, 9 to 5, doing something that I don't like. So I have no idea where the fuck.
No, that was good. I have a few points.
Okay, cool.
That.
Help me.
The one thing is I kind of have that problem too. Like I have a hard time. I've been trying to be better lately, but I haven't been very successful yet. I've had a hard time like taking a day off, like not working 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I'll try it. I need to do it more often on Sundays for sure. But I try it. It'll be like a Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, whatever. It's like, okay, take a break from work, just sit around, lounge, enjoy my morning, enjoy the weekend. And like, we don't have cable for one, living in an apartment building. Don't have dogs. Damn it.
Yeah.
Sit there, twiddle my thumbs for like 1 to 2 hours max. And sorry, I should say, like, usually these times, Keelan's probably doing schoolwork too. Like she's prepping lessons, maybe marking report cards, whatever. So that it'd be different if she had time off and we, go do shit, whatever. But let's assume that's not an option. I have a hard time not doing work. There's a lot of different reasons why, I think, but biggest thing is, more often than not, I enjoy it, especially like if I'm sitting here Saturday morning, Sunday morning, sun shining, and I have a coffee, I'm like, what would really make this perfect right now is if I read a research paper.
Yeah, that's how you're wired.
It's kind of fucked, but I don't know. So I guess that's motivation. I don't know what you call that.
Yeah, I think.
But I've been trying to work on that. Just have some more downtime.
Mm-hmm. I think you just kind of opened up another can of worms where it's like you can only really be motivated towards things you actually want to do also.
Yeah, that's huge.
Like you want to do that stuff. You want to read research papers. You want to be in the know of like the latest and greatest thing because that's what you bring to your clients and that's what you bring to, your following and just like that's your business is set up on that. Like you're the latest and greatest guy. Yeah. That's the idea. Like you want to be to the forefront of things and stir the pot a little bit and get people thinking in a non-traditional way because that doesn't work. Like we see the state of the health industry right now. It's not working the way it's been done before. So it takes people like you to kind of like, get the word out and trailblaze, I guess, in a way. But like if you didn't want to do that, you wouldn't have done it. So like then I'm like, is that even a motivated thing or is it just you're doing what you want to do? It's real confusing. I get real confused when I think about it.
It is a confusing word when you put it that way.
Yeah.
It's funny though when you were talking about kind of like not having a backup plan or like a job to kind of fall back on things or whatever. And I'd never really thought about it so much as when you just spoke about it a couple minutes ago. Definitely it's gone through my mind before, but I've definitely had a bit of like an aha moment as of late in that I do now start to think back on even just when we started this podcast, that was a perfect example because I remember sitting here, podcast 1, 2, 3. So this was, I don't know when we started this. This was probably like maybe October, November.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
yeah.
so I finished school, I would say like midway through August. So then I had like September, October, November, start working on this. And I don't think I really realized it at the time what I was doing, or realized, I guess, I don't want to say I didn't appreciate the importance of making an income, because I certainly did. Like, it's just now that I look back on it, I'm like, oh, okay, that actually happened. You hear about, as entrepreneurs, you hear this all the time over and over and over. And it's very cliche, but so very true. Is you hear these people talk about like all the difficulties and hardships they went through when they first started out.
The hustle.
Yeah. And like, I'm telling you right now, when we first started this podcast, like paycheck to paycheck for me was an understatement. Like, there'd be times when, and paying rent, groceries, everyday expenses, like probably the last couple of days of the month, maybe even the last week, like I'm kind of going at things like $80, $70, $60 in my bank account. Like, okay, I actually have to be a little bit strategic here with like my meals, what I eat. And like, I would call myself, I guess, like a proud individual in that, okay, Keelan, amazing teaching job, obviously makes good money, but I don't want her to sure, we go out for dinner, buy meals for one another and so on and so forth. And absolutely in the early run, she was paying for that more often than not. But I'm happy to say that I never once had to rely on her for like the big expenses, like the rent or the, I don't know what other examples are. There's a lot, but so I was always very proud about that. So I probably made things harder for myself than I guess some people would, but I didn't want to rely on anyone else. I was pretty adamant about that. And those times, definitely, like trying to explain that to people, like even my parents, for sure, it was certainly difficult. It's like, you're done school now, you have a master's, what are you going to do? And I was like, well, actually, I just work at home every day. I'm trying to start my own business. And they're like, oh, but like, what are you doing? Right. Well, no, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, I think finally, like, it's coming to the point. I don't know. I definitely had a little bit of a breakthrough kind of shortly after the new year, maybe February, March area. And I mean, I'm certainly not in the circumstances that I was back then. Like, things have, like you said, things have made a complete like turnaround and progression in all the right ways. And it is cool to sit here and think back about that. Like think about, like, I literally made this from nothing. Like, that's pretty cool to think about, right?
Yeah.
And now to imagine I made this out of thin air and now I can make a living off of it.
Right.
Like, that's a pretty cool feeling for sure. You know all about that. That's something that's hard to explain to people.
It is, yeah. Because people, it's an odd concept.
Yeah.
And it's always like, it can spin around to be like, oh, what about benefits? What about this and that? It's like, it's not, you just go and pay for them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't think people understand that, like, their business that they work for is just paying for that stuff for them.
Right.
Like, they're paying the same company that I would use for my benefits. I just pay them directly instead of having a company pay for them and then it come out of my paycheck.
Yeah.
Right? Like, same thing with pension and savings and investing and things like that. Like, we're not idiots.
Yeah. It's okay, like, I'll take care of it.
I got it. You know what I mean? Like,
you
work with your financial advisor, you work with the bank, you work with people to set it up for yourself, and you use the right stuff. It's like, but I don't think a lot of people think that people can do that on their own.
Yeah.
I think it's always like, oh, well, that's what the business does for you, and that's your benefits of being an employee. It's like, nah, man. Nah, you can do that you can do that on your own. And I don't know. I have this problem to like a fault where, and this is pretty much why I ended up doing what I was doing, is I really just don't like being told what to do. And I don't know why. And I don't like, that's the most like blatant way I can say it. It's not like I get mad at people if they make suggestions or things like that. That's not what I'm saying. But, I've always had like this obsession with just being okay by myself.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's really hard to explain though.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how.
Like, like, I don't want to be dependent on anything or anyone, I guess would be the thing. And like, there's a big difference between wanting something and needing something, right? Like there's a lot of like even personal relationships that can really falter if you create like a codependence on that other person. I think a lot of people can do that with their employment, job, or relationship with themselves, like attaching a certain identity or dependency on certain things. Like I like it to be a little bit more fluid than that, right? Like I can figure it out as I go, because I mean, it's like if you don't figure it out, you're fucked.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Like you got to figure it out. So the stakes being that high, that's what motivates me from a business standpoint. And I love being involved in West London CrossFit and everything that we do there. But that's not my only thing. Like I'm a partner there, but I have my own business.
Yeah.
And I think all coaches, if they've been in the industry long enough, understand that you need to create multiple revenue streams if you're going to make a lot of money. If you're going to make some money, you can just own a gym and coach and make some money. But if you want to make a lot of money and you want to see that number increase year to year, and get yourself into a point where you like really have some financial freedom, you can't just do one thing.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get buried, especially doing personal training or coaching group classes only. There's so much time spent in the gym, talking to people, meeting new people, going through processes. It's a grind, and you only get paid for the hour. And each hour you coach, you're probably there for 2.
Yeah. So you're eating, you're buying something at Farm Boy before you go coach that probably canceled out half that income anyways.
Absolutely. Getting there, gas, Uber, whatever. Like it's a vicious industry. If you just go into it that way and you're one dimensional, you're not going to make it. And this is what I want to do for my whole life. I mean, I'm 26. So if I'm going to be doing this, I've only been in it for 7-8 years full time, maybe. And like, if I want to be doing this for another, 20 plus, you got to find a way to work less and make more. You know what I mean? And that's a hilarious part to try to explain to your parents or your grandparents. They're like, wait, so you get paid for that? I'm like, yeah. They're like, how? I don't know. It's just the way things work. It's like we were talking to Brett earlier, like our guest, which I don't know when that gets released, but before we started recording, we're talking about like how much money people make off of YouTube and Instagram. It's like,
it's insane.
He brought up one of the Kardashians make $500,000 a post on Instagram. To try to explain that doesn't make any sense.
No.
You post on Instagram, you make $500,000. How? But it happens. That's just the way it works. I don't know. Might as well play to that.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm digging that. If I can make money blabbering on like this about nothing, just fitness, which nobody really knows what the hell it is anyways. Really, at this point, it's like everyone's just kind of doing their best. And I don't know. It's fun. I like it.
I was going to try and touch on a couple points there to actually bring it back around to the motivation thing, but I think you kind of already did that there.
I don't even know what I said.
I don't know what I've said. No, I was going to just bring up, what'd you say? You just said, if you don't do it, you're fucked, which is, that's pretty accurate. I guess definitely the biggest motivator is it's financial, right? That's kind of what it comes down to. That was a good point. And that ties back into what you said earlier, is that a lot of the times that goes hand in hand with anxiety. Yeah, for sure. So like, definitely, you don't think I wasn't feeling a little anxious day to day or feeling a little motivated on the regular, like, oh shit, I need to really make some things happen here. So that this is where I think it's different for everyone. My mindset was that, like, I want to make this work because, because this is what I'm passionate about. And I like wholeheartedly believe I can make a difference from doing this. And
that's huge.
But I mean, I guess there's a few other motivators there. Like, like you said, like I've always been one where I just don't enjoy having a regular job. I don't like being told what to do. I like freedom. And so I didn't want to fall back on like, just a regular average job. Like worst case scenario, could I have just gone out and found a job if things didn't go well? Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I went to school for enough years that I could go find a half-ass decent job. But to me, I'm just going to hold this thought, let you guys ponder life for a second. This damn pause option. I forget what my train of thought was. I think what I was going to say was, to me, the biggest motivating factor was, I mentioned some of them already, like the financial thing, of course, but like I said, there was a fallback option. And so that definitely came up every once in a while where it was like, okay, like, worst case scenario, what's going to happen? And this was actually one of the things that I read in a Tim Ferriss book. I think it was the 4-Hour Work Week, which I read like last year at university, which is kind of around the time where I just kind of blew things up and had a little bit of this, I don't know what you want to call it. It was really like almost like a rewiring in the way I think, and started getting this concept in my mind where I don't want to just have a regular job and I want to do my own thing. So anyways, one of the things I remembered was he talks about, regardless of, whether it's just starting your own business right away, whether it's starting a new project, whether that means, like, for us, that would mean something like, starting a new course, starting a new podcast, whatever, just sit there and think about literally what is the absolute worst thing that could happen. Because people get, again, this is going to tie in like the motivation and the anxiety and all of that, but the biggest thing around entrepreneurism and just making your own business in general is fear, is what it is, right? So people get so scared about what could go wrong and then probably never even start the project in the first place. So this was something that really resonated with me, and I'll never forget it. I really like it. Just literally sit there, think, and even write down, like, what are the absolute worst things that could happen in this specific scenario? So for me, that was like, worst thing is, 0 clients, that stays the same, and ultimately like 0 cash flow. So no income whatsoever. Well, all right, whatever. It's not a big deal. Then I'll just go out and find, I'll walk across the road and get a job at Mobody or whatever. Or like another thing I did, this was kind of like like you said, you have to have multiple streams of income. So when I started working at West London CrossFit, that was definitely something in the back of my mind. And at that time, I think, if I'm to be completely honest, it definitely was like I would call it like a fallback, like a safety net. And I now realize that's probably one of the best decisions I ever made. Because like in terms of having, just your quote unquote kind of traditional job where you are working with, like you have a boss, you're getting paid by that business and so on and so forth. Like coaching at the gym, that's the first job I've ever had in my entire life that I've actually enjoyed. Like, right. Truthfully, I absolutely hated any other job I had in my entire life. I've had, I don't know, anywhere from like 5 to 15 different jobs just through like summer work, so on and so forth. And like this one, truthfully, like first one I've ever enjoyed. And there's been obviously a lot of other benefits from going there. I mean, it's been a massive kind of, I don't know what you could call it, like a support system, I guess you could say, for my business in general, because they really do go hand in hand. And I mean, I've been lucky enough to be able to host some seminars there and a lot of clients from the gym and so on and so forth. But anyways, yeah, the whole kind of like worst case scenario thing was massive for me. And again, don't know where I was going with that, but just, I guess, an explanation of how like motivating factors. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So the biggest motivating factor, what I was going to say wasn't what you'd think it would be, in that it wasn't a financial thing. Like if I fail, oh God, I'm going to be broke. Well, no, it's if I fail, then I'm going to have to go out and do what I don't want to do, which is find a regular job, work for someone else. But worse than that, I'm going to have to leave this passion of mine, which I accepted a long time ago isn't going anywhere. And I don't want it to go anywhere because like I've now appreciated this is literally who I am. This is what I want to kind of be known for and be about for my entire life. So having to go away from that was like the absolute biggest motivator of all time. And I think that there is if you want to call it a motivator, I don't even know if you could call it that, but that's one that will definitely, like, I'm going to have for the rest of my life. Now, does that change and fluctuate? Yeah, for sure. Like I told you before we started recording today, like also as an entrepreneur, sure, I have the odd day where I'm at home sitting on the couch, 3.5 hours go by and I realize that I just listened to an entire Joe Rogan podcast and haven't done any work.
Yeah.
Does that happen a couple times a week? God, no. Like it's pretty sparse and pretty far and few in between. And even now I've accepted that that's a definite necessity, or at least for me. Like I need to go through that downtime to, maybe it is just to like develop a little bit more anxiety and kind of need a necessity to, oh shit, like I have some deadlines that I really gotta kind of get on now. And like even when I was in school for essays, studying for exams, I was a massive procrastinator, put it that way. Like essays for sure, I'd have like a 15-page essay due in under 48 hours and haven't even started yet. So I've always kind of been that way. Some people, I think this is where like individuality and individual differences come in. Like people try and tell you, no, like this would be better work if you lay it out, do a little bit every day, have like a perfect structure, a plan in place, and yada, 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 and so on and so forth. But like, to me, I call that kind of bullshit. Like sometimes I need a little bit of that pressure, and that's when I'm going to do my best work. Yeah. And I think you'll definitely have some points to that, because I think that brought up another thing you were talking about later, is that just this idea around like having a plan and being okay with that kind of fluctuating. And
yeah, for sure. Because we were talking about earlier about, we were kind of joking, like, when has one day gone as you had it planned out at the beginning of the day? Right? Like I'll have days chalked up with like 8 hours of in-person coaching, like in-house brick and mortar gym coaching. All of a sudden I have 0. You wake up and people cancel, things come up, whatever. I don't know. That's just part of it, kind of being flexible in that way, for sure. One thing that, while you were talking there, you kept mentioning, like, you would say motivated and anxious in the same sentence. And I think you really hit the nail on the head. And I was trying, because while I was like ranting about this and thinking, before I go there though, like, I think your downtime when you were watching that podcast, like for me, and I don't know, I can only speak from my experience, like that creative process for me, like I need the downtime for the creative stuff to come out.
Yeah, exactly.
To like think about what I'm doing next, and like whether the podcast was something you were actively listening to or something that was on in the background while your wheels were just spinning and you were able to just put your phone down, not be distracted, and just kind of think for a little bit. Like I'm going to Montreal this weekend, and I couldn't be more excited for the plane rides, because I do so much planning and thinking on the plane rides, because I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
Right? You're stuck. You're not allowed. You can't get up. You're stuck there for 2-3 hours, however long the flight is. And I'm so excited for that time. I do a lot of that stuff like while I'm driving, or in the morning, like I'll watch Sports Center, but like I'm thinking about what I'm going to do during that time. Yeah. And it's like everyone can do that, and I think everyone does, but it's just, I don't know if I can ever fully check out. And I don't know if that's a problem or not. I haven't decided. But like, even like, watching a hockey game or watching Sports Center, like out with friends or whatever, like I'm always thinking about this stuff.
Yep.
And I don't know. That's same with you. Like when you're always thinking about it, you're that passionate about it. I don't.
Yeah, I'm the exact same way. And I don't think you can explain that to anyone else who isn't in that same boat.
Yeah. And the stakes for you, like, couldn't have been higher. Like, as you're talking there, like, that's who you want to be. So, like, are you really willing to give up your whole self for something else just because it might not work out? Well, it might work, too. So you might as well go that direction, right? Like, that's a big thing. Like, I don't want to give up who I am and how I talk and what I do just to try to fit some mold that somebody else wants me to be. I'm never going to do that. It's never going to happen. And, like, I don't know. Again, a fault, a shortcoming, to some people, maybe. Does it make me an asshole sometimes? Probably. But like that's just
Everyone
who I
has
am.
those, yeah.
Like I'm not going to change for anyone, right? And that's how I want my friends to be too. Like I want them to be the same in every situation. Like look at them and know that like they're saying something to me the same way they'd say it to somebody else. Like if you wouldn't say that thing to somebody's face, you can't say it at all, sort of idea.
Which is the problem with social media now, I think.
Yeah, chameleons. You can be a chameleon.
Yeah.
Just kind of bend and mold yourself into something that you're not. And everyone can be okay with that.
Yeah.
But back to the anxiety thing, like you're mentioning, like motivated and anxious in the same sentence. I think you did it like 4 or 5 times. And it's interesting to me because I honestly think, I don't know if I've ever been motivated, but I sure as hell been anxious a lot and scared and like, kind of like low points and things like that. And I think the bounce back feeling from that is when you're motivated, maybe. But like, I also think a lot of us are taught to hide those sort of emotions, or if kids feel that way. Okay, let me use an example, like exams at university or whatever. Like how many kids just like fake a sickness or say, oh, and I have to be careful with this. Please just know the distinction between like the disease and the feeling, because I'm talking about the feeling.
Right.
But like, I think it's pumped out there that if you're feeling the feelings that we felt, then you have something wrong with you.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's ridiculous, man. Like you're a human being. You're supposed to feel those emotions. You can't sleep before an interview. You're not anxious. You're a human. You're feeling things.
Yeah.
Okay. You have feelings of anxiety. That doesn't mean you have anxiety. Those are two very different things. Things aren't going well in your professional life, your relationship, you're feeling depressed. You can have depressed feelings without being clinically depressed. So they're two very different things. But I think the lines are so blurred, and there's such a quick jump to like identifying as having anxiety or having depression, that kids and people in general just aren't allowed to feel those things anymore. Or when they do feel those things, they have so much like input to them that they just freak out and they're like, I can't do anything. I'm just going to do nothing because that's all I can do right now because I'm feeling anxious and everybody tells me that that's bad. I'm a bad person if I feel anxious. I'm a bad person if I feel depressed. I'm lazy. If I'm anxious, I'm too high strung. Like there's so many things like that coming in where it's like maybe those feelings are actually what motivation's supposed to be, and we're just masking
That's
it
a hell of a good point.
with all this like either medication or like isolation from other things, where it's like you gotta let yourself go through those feelings instead of trying to mask it and hide it.
I definitely want to mention something about what you just said, but another thing I was thinking, I think there's a difference between feeling anxious because of motivation versus feeling anxious because of lack of motivation. So like the exam is a pretty good example. Like not necessarily motivated, especially if you don't like the subject or the topic, you're not motivated to write the exam. Some people hate school. They're just there because it's kind of what people do. Well, you have absolutely no motivation to study for that. And then you start getting scared and anxious because you know the test is creeping up and you're probably fucked.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think if you and I are feeling anxious, it's because we're motivated to grow the business, get this out to more people, make some change, do some good. And it's like, I'm starting to feel a little bit anxious because I haven't put work in my business in, too longer than I'd like. And I have all these cool ideas that I want to get out there to people to ultimately fuel that or satisfy that motivation that I have to, again, just get that passion out to people. And so I'm starting to feel a little bit anxious.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a key difference there. I've been thinking a lot about the mental health thing lately as well. I don't know why, but you just hit the nail on the head. Like for a while I was, and I probably at the time when we recorded a little podcast on mental health, I think at that time I was probably a little unsure or uneasy about saying something like, or explaining something like, obviously it's a problem, but at the same time, we've created a lot of the problem on our end. But I've come to the conclusion now that I have absolutely no problem saying this and explaining it. And it's very, very, very similar to what you just said, but like, do we have a problem where the serious cases of mental illness are increasing? Like, fuck yeah, 100%. You can't deny 100%. That. But like, what percentage of that? So let's look at the total people in Canada, total people in North America who have been prescribed anti-anxiety, antidepressant medications in the last handful of years. What percentage of those people actually have this case of like clinical depression, anxiety, whatever it may be, so much so that they can't go on with their daily functioning? And what percentage of these people just don't know how to deal with these emotions? Or yeah, I mean, you essentially just explained that right now. Yeah, and I'm sure some people would maybe throw their arms up and be in an uproar about this, but I mean, I'm totally on the same page as you here in that, like, it's normal to feel these every once in a while. The problem is people run to the doctor, explain these feelings to them, and then they just get thrown medications to them without just, and I'm not trying to like, I'm not like putting down doctors or anything in me saying this. I'm putting down the people who need to learn how to deal with their emotions. Right. And again, I'm making this clear distinction here, but sometimes you just need to be honest with yourself and say, like, can I deal with my emotions better? Can I even develop healthier relationships with my peers? Have I taken other precautionary measures to make sure these are not influencing my mental state? Things like exercise, things like diet. I don't know if people will have heard this podcast yet by the time this one comes out. I don't think so, but I talked about the overlap between inflammation and symptoms of depression and concussion after cancer and after poor diet. And that probably won't make sense to people right now, but listen to the next one and then you'll see. Point being, by bringing that up, is that, yeah, exercise, nutrition can have massive influence on the way you feel mentally. So have you taken care of these? Have you taken care of, what else did I say, your relationships? Did you get rid of your phone for like a month at least and see how you feel on a daily basis? Did you look at how things are going at work? Like, are you chronically stressed out, hating your daily life? And do you have the power to change some of these things and still be able to deal with whatever the quote unquote worst case scenario is? Like, all of these things, I think, like, as a society mostly, and like people to some extent, but I think society in general has maybe let people down. Like, we need to deal better with all these other, you can call them motivating factors, that have kind of driven us to be unable to deal with our emotions properly. Because like you said perfectly, like, to be a human, you should fucking feel these emotions every once in a while. Like, that doesn't mean something's wrong with you. No. That doesn't mean you need drugs. Like, are there cases when people have like genetic variants and gene polymorphisms and chemical imbalances where people need these meds? Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, and that's why absolutely. Yeah. Look at the suicide rates. Like, those are going up for a reason. Right. Like, that's pretty legit. I'm not talking about those scenarios. I'm talking about probably a large percentage of people who, again, have been given these meds and may not in fact need them. And like, one more last thing about that is, you know how powerful and determining that is to have someone, especially a young kid who's like 13, 14, 15 years old, to go into, a medical practitioner and be given these meds and being told to their face, oh, you have depression, or, oh, you have anxiety. We're going to give you these drugs to help you deal with that. Like, you don't think that's like rewiring their thought process right there? That, we've talked about this before, like, thoughts are fucking powerful. They can have some physical change on your brain and your entire body. So you don't think that being told that and then that changing your thought process is going to even like lead you down that path? God, yeah. And that's not even acknowledging like the literal side effects of what these drugs do. Yeah. Because you become tolerant on them. It's just like anything, like an alcoholic. Yeah. Alcoholic who loses alcohol, whatever. You have a tolerance, and then once you take that away, you're fucked. Yeah. And like you said, it's tough because it's like people have cancer, but people have like a sore
bowel or something like that, don't go to the doctor saying they think they have cancer, right? They're like, oh, I got some sore here. What's up? Right? Like if somebody's feeling anxious chronically and they go to the doctor, it shouldn't be like automatically jump to a mental illness because that's such a gap to cover, right? Like, and there's medication is incredible and saves millions of lives a year. And thank God we have it. And nobody should ever feel ashamed of going to the doctor worried about having something like that. It's just like, it's so blurry.
There's some fucked up side effects. Yeah.
The thing that I'm most concerned about, like just separate from, because it's always this conversation is so sticky, and I know people could like twist and change our words to be something that we don't intend them to be, which again, I'm going to reiterate, there's a difference between feelings and mental illness, and that's our stance on it, and that hasn't changed, and it's not going to be, like, we're talking about the feelings, we're not talking about the mental illness, because neither of us are experts on that stuff. We're only talking about like managing feelings and motivation and things in this podcast. It's like we want people to turn into robots. So like anyone who's outside of the norm, which is fucking boring as shit, then they need to be medicated or changed. Like, oh, you can't sit still in class, you have ADD, take this.
Yeah.
Or, oh, you're feeling sad. Instead of like supporting that person, and a lot of it is so political and outside of our area expertise that we can't even touch it. But like, instead of providing that child with the proper support that they need in either to help them with their situation, either at home or whatever's causing them to feel that way, and like working them through it, it's easier just to throw something else at them. But all that does is get them into that cycle, and it's so hard for somebody to break out. And we all know how powerful identity can be. Like as soon as you attach yourself to something else, like it's so, you see it in politics all the time. Oh, I'm liberal or I'm conservative. Oh, I'm anxious. I'm depressed. I'm white. I'm black. I'm a male. I'm a female. But there's so many different, like all of that is fluid, right? And that's more evident now than ever. Because thankfully people are becoming more accepted of people being different in some ways, and then in other ways it seems like we all have to be the same, which is weird. It seems like from an appearance standpoint, everyone's fine with everyone being whatever, but in terms of like the status quo, everyone has to like get in line, sit down, shut up. And if you're outside of that, something's wrong with you. And that's, I don't know how the hell you fix that, but it's a little tough.
No, that's a good point, though. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like we kind of conquered this previous stigma, and then this is like the next big challenge.
This is the next one. Yeah, which is good.
Yeah.
Let's conquer it. Let's get the wheels spinning on it. But it takes a lot more effort, and a lot more. I mean, you saw how polarizing and difficult it is to get people just to treat humans as humans because of the way they look.
Yeah.
Now you're trying to get humans to treat each other as humans because they think differently. Oh my God, that's so much deeper than just the way somebody looks. And we had so much trouble with that. It's still not good, but at least there's laws in place to protect it now.
People always get mad when I try and do this, but I can speak just a tiny little bit to like some positive changes they've made in schools, just through hearing like some of the structural changes that they do in classrooms now from Keelan firsthand is, and probably the first time I heard this, I would have thought like, oh, that's stupid. Why would they do that? It's just the littlest of things though, is I don't know how common it is, but even having like different seating options for kids. So say, you're sitting there learning about history or whatever. Not everyone technically has to be sitting in their desk, which like you said is just, we have our rows, get in your desk, sit still at your desk and pull your chair up tight and take notes, whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, now it's like would these kids learn more and be better able to pay attention if they were at a standing desk in the corner? Would they be better if maybe there's a carpet in the back left corner and the kid could sit there cross-legged? Or if there's, not a hard ass plastic chair that's a little bit more comfy where the kid can sit there quiet and learn. And at first I was like, that's stupid. Why would they do that? Like, why can't they just sit in a desk? But the more you think about it, it's like, well, actually, yeah, like try and tell even like an 8-year-old, say an 8-year-old boy, just because ADHD is more common in boys, try and tell an 8-year-old boy who has like some symptoms of ADHD to sit there in his desk and pay attention. Like, that's not happening. Like, especially if it's the last class of the morning or last class of the day when the kid hasn't been outside, hasn't had recess, hasn't had gym. Maybe their lunch was shit if they're in like a troubled neighborhood. Like, if having that kid in the corner at like whatever it is, like a stand-up desk with, whatever different accessories at his table to help him pay attention, and that's going to allow that student to like keep quiet and actually be a little bit more engaged in the lesson and not disrupt the rest of the class. Well, then I'd say that's like a win-win.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. And if that's just the environment of the school, because I can just hear like, my grandparents or something like, oh, well, that's going to be distracting to the rest of the class. I was like, only if it's treated as an abnormality, right? Like, if it's made to be a spectacle. So like, that is an amazing and drastic change from what I remember high school and definitely public school being for me, where it's like bell rings, line up, walk in, sit down, assigned seating, don't move, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, you guys can't see me right now, but I've stood up, sat down, I'm moving my hands, I'm swiveling in my chair, I'm all over the place. And that always got me in trouble in school. But I always got good marks. Like, I learned stuff just because I wasn't like arms crossed on my desk, sitting up tall, staring right into the teacher's eyes. Doesn't mean I wasn't processing what they were saying. It's just people learn a little bit differently. So if that's the environment of the classrooms now, and it allows for a little bit more of that individuality, and, it's more adaptable to the individual, then everyone's going to learn better. And nobody's going to care if Timmy's standing up at their desk, because they're like, I want to sit down, man. I'm comfortable, right? Because that's their personality. Or if somebody's sitting cross-legged on the floor, like, I wouldn't want to do that because it would hurt my butt. Like, I'd rather be standing or sitting. So it's like everyone can kind of play to their own strengths, and then
that one's
help them develop as a person.
I know where an argument for something like that would come from, and it's kind of along the lines of, I don't know if you hear, and I'd probably say this too because I think that it's true, is that we kind of live in like where kids are almost in like a bubble nowadays. You know what I mean when I say that? Like a bubble boy generation. Yeah, very. But to me, that's not the same thing of the scenario that I just explained. Like, those are two different things to me. Like, so what can I give you as an example? So a good example is like, spoke to a friend of mine who is high school teacher, but was like filling in as a substitute one day, probably like grade 9 or 10 classroom or something like that. Kid is sitting there like, I don't know where they were, but just kind of like rows of desks, sitting there with their feet up on the desk and kind of like, like tapping at the desk or something like that. And like clearly blatantly being disruptive in that they were like rebelling, having their feet up. Teacher would tell them, put their feet down. They don't listen, and yada, yada. So actually disrupting the class. So the idea of like the bubble boy thing is that, well, teachers are like very, very limited now in what you can even do like to that student. So like the perfect example, he told me this word for word, was that something along the lines of like, can you please like get your feet off your desk or whatever? And the student is just blatantly like, what are you going to do? Like, push my feet off the desk? Because if you do that, I'm going to tell the principal, and I know that you're going to get whatever. Because they have so many regulations now, you literally can't do anything with students. Like, you can't lay a finger on them, or else they're going to be whatever. Like, policy A and B is going to just mess them up essentially. So to me, that's like a different distinction of, like no rules versus, well, just different seating so that a kid can kind of like take better advantage of the education.
Yeah. Learn a little bit more.
A lot of motivation.
Should we do wrap it up a little bit?
Yeah, we'll wrap it up.
All right. Well, you've put up with us for an hour, so we got to wrap this up before we lose you guys. Obviously, it's a topic that both of us are passionate about, and we'll talk about all day long if possible. I mean, the big thing, like kind of bringing it back, like we started off just talking about, motivation and where it comes from. I think the challenge for most people is just allowing themselves to feel things, just feel in general. If you're masking those things constantly, trying to create something that's not, or like that macho man or strong woman sort of mentality where it's like nothing ever gets to me, I'm tough. That whole mindset of you're weak if you have feelings. I think it's gone way too far. It's gone to the point where it's really detrimental, I think, to a lot of people and their individuality and just their process as a human being. I know it's definitely part of what's pushed me to extremes in some way. And I kind of like opened up about, I feel like they're to a fault and some shortcomings that I have, that I'll go so far one way to not go the other way. But I mean, just like anything else, we're just a process, or I guess a product of our, not a process, a product of our environment. And I mean, I've always been fortunate enough to have a family that's really supportive in everything that I do, even if they don't fully understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And that's in all things, like life, sports, business. Obviously, life's a lot more than just business and CrossFit and all the other sports and stuff, right? Like there's life decisions that you kind of just dive into head first and see what happens. It might always be the smartest thing, but I mean, you got to stick to your own guns, basically, like create uncomfortable circumstances that force you to be better in whatever way. And for me, that's kind of my motivation, is like just constantly being challenged and keep things exciting.
I think you just mentioned a good topic for the next podcast.
What's that?
Just how we're all scared of being uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah, I can rant about that one too.
Yeah.
I got a good one. Yeah.
Exercise is probably the best example.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
stay tuned.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for putting up with us again for an hour. Catch you next time. If you guys have anything to say about these episodes, good or bad, I don't want it. I don't want you guys to agree with everything we say. That's boring.
Soon it'll be easier to kind of comment and pose questions based on like a specific episode or next episode or whatever, because we'll just kind of have like a single common platform. It'll make things easier for everyone.
Yeah, that's gonna be cool. Can't wait to get all the chirpy comments about how stupid we are and how dumb we look, and everything else that comes with all the social platforms that have a big reach.
It's gonna be good. That's fine. I'll just wear a ski mask.
Yeah. We'll just put the camera on the mic. That's it. Don't see us.